everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. As you recall, most of you were at the meeting in November, and we discussed in situ data, and also included with that the intercomparison activity. And we've been talking about these things for years. I think finally we're now getting around to doing something about it as a community. So welcome. I'm very glad you could join. I'm just going to talk very briefly. I'm going to assume the agenda is approved. If we have time at the end, we'll ask people to bring forward additional items for discussion. I'll give a very, very brief presentation, just a few slides. Then we'll talk about the two initiatives. One is on in situ coordination, enhanced in situ coordination, and the other one is on an intercomparison. And I guess you've all seen the agenda. And we'll wrap up with a review of the actions and next steps. And as I said, if we have time, we'll ask for additional contributions and possibly additional activities that we want to look at, because certainly the two things before us today are not the whole area we want to cover, but it's a good place to start. So going back to our discussion in November, I think what we saw there is that it really makes sense for GEOGLAM to get more involved in situ data management. We probably as a community have most to gain. We're a global community that use and generate in situ data as much as anybody and more than most. And we benefit from its availability. We have the partnerships. We are the partnerships. GEOGLAM is a cooperative initiative, so we're well placed to do something about this. And we have the expertise across the board, from computing to algorithm development to collection of in situ data and so on. This community has all the expertise, I think, embedded within it to do the work that we need to do to move forward on this. So some of the possible actions that were discussed back in November were establishing data sharing guidelines, recommendations on who, when, and how, as well as legal tools. And if you recall, we had quite an extensive list of things that could be achieved. We discussed developing an in situ data collection protocols, and we've done some of this already with JCAM, of course. We have the in situ data collection protocols as well as field site protocols. And these have been quite useful, and I know they're accessed not just by JCAM, but they've been accessed broadly ever since they're developed. So it's been quite a valuable resource, and I think we can take some benefit from that. And now we've embarked on the essential agricultural variables, and in situ data is really a part of that whole definition as well. We need to use the EAV requirements to help drive some of the in situ data needs. And in a sense, the work that's going on now in World Cereals that we'll hear a bit about is driving forward a lot of the EAV type work, or at least for crop land and crop type. Tools to support the collection and utilization of data. Many of us have tools that we've developed for the field in particular to collect data. So this is an opportunity to start to look at that and organize that better. And then develop GEOGLAM in situ data management system of systems. We've always talked about a federated system. We build on what exists rather than creating something new and separate. So that's kind of where we were back then. And this is some of the key messages that came out of our discussion. We felt that there's a really good general support for an enhanced coordination role for GEOGLAM and in situ. We should start by taking care of data collected by the GEOGLAM partners and build on existing activities where possible. And we're going to see the two proposals for subtasks today are built on that approach. We should start by taking on something small and concrete, and that came up multiple times. I think it's a good idea for something as broad and wide-ranging as in situ data to look at really doable things. Now, I don't think the things we're going to propose are that small, actually, but because they're building on active things that are going on already, we have an opportunity to kind of accelerate and move forward quicker than we would if we were starting from scratch. We want to tackle issues, not just data. So yes, we want to make data openly available. as much as possible. But behind that, we want to develop a strategy for managing it, guidelines for collecting it and managing it, and some of the best practices that can be applied, not just for GEOGLAM, but even broader. And a community approach, as all things we do, it's all voluntary, but what I think we all find is that as we contribute within the community, we really magnify our efforts and get much more out of the activity overall by cooperating and working together. So I'm not going to go into detail on this, but the two proposals we have to start with, and these came after our meeting. I've had a number of bilateral discussions and discussions with groups of people in our community over time, looking at what we can do to move forward quickly. And the two that have come forward so far that seem very positive is the in situ data coordination issue or initiative, sorry. And as I said, that would be built upon work that's already going on within the World Serial Project. And also the intercomparison initiative, building on work by Sophie, and that she's been working with the CIAS land product validation working group, and they're developing intercomparison guidelines. It'd be good to have an agriculture specific set of that, and then in particular start to apply that. And we're proposing a couple of possible areas. East Africa, because of the proliferation of analytical products, it'd be a great place to work, important place to work, as well as Asia rice, because in our November meeting, if you recall, Shinichi, Tui, and so on had mentioned different activities that had gone on and different challenges in the rice community, and it might be good to capture some of that. So it's just a suggestion, nothing wired in at this point. So with that, I think first up is first I wanted to go to Shinichi. Shinichi will not be able to join us for the whole meeting. He's here until past. So I wanted to give him a chance if he's able to present maybe one slide and talk for a minute or two on what they're doing. And with that, Shinichi, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. And sorry for my only participation partially because I have the double booking with this meeting and also the trilateral collaboration meeting with ISA and NASA. Therefore, I have to only join the 30 minutes. And this is actually, can you see my screens now? Ian, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, okay.
We'll make the slide available if you're having trouble, so please just continue on, Shinichi.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and part of the GEOGLAM activities, especially with the Asian Oceania regional groups, we have the agriculture task group 5, which is mainly focusing in the rice crop, and we have the remote meeting in the February 24th of this year, chaired by the ISRO with the University of Tokyo Professor Kato. And one of the topic which we already discussing is we agree to continue to the monitoring in the rice, even in the pandemic situation, what was happened and what will be happened. And also one of the very big discussion is how to integrate the use of the available product, rice related product in regions or in country or even in some province, and also how to connect in the in situ observation activities, especially for in Asia. It's very difficult to sharing the in situ data across the countries. Only country would like to keeping the in situ data, but they are happy to supporting to have the intercomparison with the available the in situ data with our data set, regional data set. So such a way we just have some of the discussion with respective countries. And one of the good example with the sales in the sales 2019 was Vietnam was chaired, And in that time, the VNSC, Vietnam National Space Center, sharing the low Mekong's rice crop map derived by the Vietnam and the GeoRice by Chui, and also the JAXA. And we have the intercomparison of such data in the Vietnam, and also I also asking the support by the Thai government, and also the Cambodians and the Indonesians, and they are very happy to compare with their available data with our data, and providing the feedback. And we especially for the JAXA, to tune up our algorithm and to do the more accurate product producing. So such kind of the work is also continue to in the 2020s with ISRO. And this is ISRO creating the rice crop map in all of the Bangladesh. But they mainly using the optical instruments by the ISRO. But the combination with the ISRO, the optics with SAR data from the JAXA, they have the AI technology, apply AI technology as improving the accuracy, the integrated use of the optics and also the SAR data. So this kind of the activity is to continue to the low Mekong and BIMTech. BIMTech is in the Southeast Asia and South Asia activities. And so we would like to also continue to collaborating with them, and also to try to creating the virtual platform to the region, to sharing the available data, especially for the rice crop product, and to continue to working together with in our region. That is the current our activities. That's a very good the linkage with Ian mentioned. But one of the tricky issue is several years ago with Chui, we tried to promoting the in situ data collection in Asia. But as I already mentioned, it's very difficult to sharing the in situ data itself. Therefore, we just changing the strategies. Instead of just to sharing the in situ data itself, instead we just to promoting the comparison of our data set with their in situ data in their countries. That is the current situation. Thank you, Ian, to have the time.
Okay, thank you, Sunichi. So it's too bad you can't be with us the whole time, but it sounds like the activities that are going on in Asia Rice and TUI, presumably with GeoRice, could fit quite well. So we'll see how the actions and so on come out of this meeting, and hopefully we can plug in some of the activities that you have going on there. So with that, we have to move ahead to the next presentation, which is on the first initiative, which is the intercomparison. And Hendrik, I guess you're going to provide that presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks for inviting us. I will share my screen. I guess you can see this?
Yeah, it'd be better if you can, yeah, exactly. A little small.
Yep. Now it's okay?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I have a few slides on introducing the World Serial Project, which is a project for the European Space Agency for 2 years, which we are running with a consortium led by Vito, together with other partners like EASA, Wageningen University and Research, ELIF, the University of Valencia, NASA Harvest, and CS from France. I think that I've got, otherwise Sven can help me later, but these are the partners. And there's one slide and mainly on the objectives, and we're halfway. So World Serial is about demonstrating the feasibility of global crop mapping at a field scale, 10 meters, and at the same time develop an innovative, efficient open source EU algorithm and tools making full use of the cloud. And important for this meeting to build a collaborative approach to exchange with the agricultural community the relevant in situ data sets that we need for calibration our algorithms and to validate the products, and disseminate these results in a transparent manner. And finally, to showcase these products by conducting some use case studies, for instance, one with GeoGLAM and on SDG reporting. And below you see the URL, so then you can find more about World Serial. So in World Serial, it's important to collect in situ data for calibration and validation. We call it actually reference data. Some specifications, first of all, data that can be shared, of course. So looking at the data policy and the licensing. Observations on land cover and crop type for a specific location, for a specific time. Covering recent years, so from 2017 onwards, because of the Sentinel era. Enough information on the timing. The minimum that we need is a year season. For instance, for Kenya, a year would not be sufficient because you have 2 seasons. So preferably a realistic date, a real date, otherwise year season, otherwise year. And sufficient spread over classes and so different crop types and spread over the seasons. And yeah, looking for those data sets that have a large number of observations and also have supporting documentation that ease the data creation, so sufficient information about the data set. So that is the reference data. To get that data, we are building a community to open the data, exchange the data, and also validate and products and identify gaps. And of course, there are gaps in several ways. In this community, like the NASA Harvest Initiative, YASA, FITO, our Wageningen University and Research. Within the GeoGLAM community, for instance, this working group, Radiant Earth, the ML, are also working with CGR and the big data platform and the different CGR institutes. And then how would they open the data or why? First of all, you have these more generic incentives, I would say, that it's more common to share data, social, public money, so that are. But we have also some more specific incentives in World Serial that if people would share, you enhance your visibility of your published data, and of course the attribution of your contribution. In World Serial, you also have first access to harmonized reference data, to the knowledge that we are developing, benefit from co-development, for instance, on the algorithms, write joint papers, for instance, on a validated global product that we will make in the second year. We're also looking at specific solutions on the data exchange with major players like CGR, big data, and we do financial support within the World Serial, but it's very limited. So different incentives to share, and yeah, we're building this community to data and share the data. Within World Serial, we have building a global reference database, collecting data not only from field observations, but also from classifications that are validated by the crowd or the experts, like the GeoWiki, LacoWiki of YASA. Training automated classification, the classified maps, crop type maps, that could be valuable in our case to train the models, the algorithms. And parcel registrations, like once we have that data, we do the harmonization, and so we defined a protocol for that. First, world legend based on the ICC. So we're mapping to that legend on crop type, on land cover, crop type 1100, wheat, for instance. Looking at the validity time, preferably realistic date, if it's only otherwise a year season, and then we look at the crop calendar and we determine a correct date for that, an estimated date. annotation of the data set, so fully describing the data set, looking at the data policy, how we can share the data. Also technically more, we have a predefined format, and we also are developing rules to assess the quality from 3 different dimensions, spatial accuracy, temporal accuracy, and expressing that on a scale. Here on the right, a kind of logical cycle of collecting data. So from the top, the researcher is collecting data, then usually he published the paper, the research in a peer-reviewed journal, but nowadays also more and more publishing the data itself in open data journals, and then that data comes available, mainly the metadata and the data itself in a certain format, but not really that it is fair. It's findable, accessible, but it's not interoperable and not reproducible at the moment then. So here on the red square, this is what we in World Serial are doing, is then harmonizing the data and opening the data and make it available through an API to the third parties. This is a kind of cycle of how data is collected and being published and made open to the public. This very briefly on what we have collected so far, like ELPIS data, Sentinel-2-Agri, GEOGLAM, Radiant Earth, CDR, data from different institutes, IETA, etc. This is mainly on the crop type, but there is, of course, more that you can measure in Situ, like phenology, yield levels, leaf area index. And so beyond the crop location, that kind of data around the field experiment that is useful for crop classification, but also useful, for instance, for calibrating a crop growth model. For that type of data, we have developed AgroStack together with Vito and our organization, and to stimulate exchange and use of that key crop data. That is a kind of global crop trial repository for visualization. You see it on the right, a viewer that we have developed. And that is then has some data from an open data journal, a minimum data set. And the characteristics of this specific, I would say, to manage and open that type of data is that beyond that AgroStack, there's a generic flexible data model, so that can handle different domains. And on top of that, we developed the database. We have interfaces to import the data, extract it through APIs, for instance, for that viewer. And we also developed integration that we also used in World Serial. But this AgroStack is a kind of solution to store and open the data beyond the way science publish their data in data repositories like Harvard Dataverse, for instance. Then the final slide is more. So in World Serial, we are collecting data, harmonizing data, but World Serial is only 2 years, and then it will stop. So we have 1 additional year. Further data that we have collected and our protocols, and GeoGLAM could be a logical platform to do that. And how would we continue then on identifying new data sets beyond what we have collected now? You've seen the slide, we have collected some data, we're working on new data, for instance, from CIRAD, will be published soon in a data science journal. That type of, so we are continuing also within this project, like Copernicus, GeoGLAM will collect and harmonize and more. But after World Serial, who will what are more new data sets? Of that data set, not only crop type, but also the other characteristics that are relevant for our domain, like phenology, etc. And how to continue. So that's on World Serial and beyond. But more in general, the in situ collection best practices. There are a number, like the GEOGLAM guidelines. CGR have their guidelines, notebooks. Radiant Earth has protocols. So there are some things out there, and how could we continue with that? On storage and opening, we have these platforms like the CGR institutes have their Guardian. It's a metadata repository, but then you are guided or forwarded to data repositories like Harvard Dataverse or Synodo. But what I just said, the data is not yet open in the sense that you still have to do some harmonization and really opening the data. Agrostak is then an example in doing that, and in World Serial we're also working on that. But it's that additional step in harmonization and opening the data. You could think about a kind of federated approach, different platforms that following common standards on API, on legends, on metadata, so that they can connect to each other. Finally, of course, the researchers collect data, and how could they share the data? You need some incentives, some funding to make that happen. So we could help the researchers in best practices, in guidelines on collection. If you use certain ODK notebooks and you already have all the right metadata there, then it's also more easy to share. And there's not that much effort maybe in harmonizing and making the data available. Not only on the collection, but also on the curation, on metadata, licensing, etc. So this is what I wanted to tell about World Serial, what we're doing, and more in general, things around in situ data. So hopefully it's a bit clear. And
Thanks a lot, Hendrik.
I don't know how much time we have, but we could discuss a bit on these points. And
that'd be great if we can discuss it. I wonder if you have any questions, if you can put them into the chat. 2 reasons it's easy to manage that way, and I can also retain the chat after so that we have a record of the questions aside from the recording. I'll just say that I hope everybody sees the advantage of possibly working with World Serial. They've put in an incredible amount of effort already. Just the inventory of existing in situ data is very impressive. Hendrik's done a great job, and then dealing with some of the issues around Agrostak managing the data and so on. Now, it's a 2-year project, so we have an opportunity here to harness and leverage what they've done and really bring it into the GeoGLAM community and make it a community activity. And now that we have a bit more stability in the Geo-Secretariat, I think there's an opportunity here to see the Secretariat kind of play a bigger role as we go on post-World Serial Project to help in that process. Also, of course, working with Geo-Secretariat, who have great interest in this work as well, and their development of the Geo-Knowledge Hub can probably play a very important role. So with that, I'll be quiet and see if there's any questions. Nothing in the chat so far. No questions from the floor at all.
Ian, if there's no questions, I think what's really important and what is key is indeed those for us, and what we're running up against is a bit on incentives to share data. So Hendrik mentioned a few, but there are probably more. So I think from the group there might be some ideas on that as well, on how can we simplify each other's life, on good incentives to share data. Publications is one. I don't know if there are any bright ideas. It would be nice to hear them.
Diego's mentioned the possibility of getting some funding, or one of the things I think we could do, if we can be strategic about this and start documenting the process end-to-end better, we could start advocating with the funding agencies to better define what we mean by open data, open in situ, open reference data, because just having a project contract that says it needs to be open is not good enough. We have to define what we mean by open. It needs to be accessible, it needs to be curated, managed, and so on. And I think our community is in a good place to take an action forward to start to define those pieces so that we can provide them. Diego, since I've been speaking about you, I see your hand raised, so please chip in here.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. Yes, something that you just talked about. I think funding can be one of the ways. There are also a lot of other ways. Also, mentioned that funders require open data. In general, we can read this. But it's difficult to get direct funding, for example, for developing countries for in situ data collection or doing surveys. I think it's not necessarily a lot of money. So it's perhaps $10,000, $15,000 per year. You can do, for example, a survey in Argentina that is quite big country. I think it can be something that could help for data sharing. Also, if founders requires open data, one of the things is, well, you need to, how can we help that direct funding could go to developing countries, for example. Also, I think there are other ways. I think participation in projects like World Serial, an intensive participation from partners, working in. Perhaps if you start participating in how the maps will be developed, which algorithms are going to be developed, and the people is involved in the project, in the things, I think they will share the data automatically. And another thing is there are a lot of difficulties, as also Shinichi said. Sometimes it's not easy to know who is the owner of the data, because some people, for example, at our institute collect data from one region, other from other region. Also, we have an agreement with companies, so we get a data set, and it's difficult to find an owner of the data, and it's difficult to. You need to agree with all of them how to share the data. So it's another difficulty. Okay, thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Diego. And I think Hendrik's been dealing with a lot of those issues already, I imagine. So we need to wrap this up before too long. I have no more questions in the chat, but I think we need some actions. I don't think we're going to get hard actions out of this today. We just don't have enough time, but it was a great introduction. So I don't know, Hendrik, Sven, maybe we can work together to define some more pointed actions that we can send out to the group to weigh in on as far as moving forward.
No, that's fine by me. And Diego, I already mailed you. Maybe we should try to set up a bilateral as well to discuss some of the in situ data. For Argentina a bit more in detail also on sharing and contributing to World Serial.
Good.
If I may, I would like just to add something on in the agricultural virtual lab from ESA. We did a user survey, so you know that it will be an open source laboratory, an open source platform, and the aim is to push the contributors to share not only in situ data but also algorithms, etc. And so there was a survey on that, and one of the questions was, at which condition would you like to share? And so we had around 20 answers coming from CG, GEOGLAM, GCAM, and GWEX, and other big communities. And so the answers were not really in terms of funding, but in terms of having a recognition of the authorship. And so it could be like that they are cited, or also that they look for collaboration, that they are involved in the way the data are used, etc. And so the answers went more in the direction of having a kind of, let's say, best practices on how to use data which have been shared, which ensure that the data are not lost and that the work that was done before is not does not just disappear. And so, yeah, we discussed also when they share, we can propose automatically different kinds of licenses. And so this is not the users that have to find exactly the licenses that they want, but there are different options predefined. Well, there were different options on the table on how to facilitate a bit this thinking, and yeah, just complement a bit. No, this was not only fundings. This is a bit what Igor said.
Yeah, no, we're aware that funding is one. The other, we're also reaching out for the other options, of course, because as usual, the funding on for in situ data is largely underestimated in these kinds of projects. Is the report that you mentioned, is it already available, Sophie? Can we access it somewhere?
It is. I don't know if it is yet available, but it should be. If it's not yet, it should be soon. Maybe this is still in review by ESA, but I don't know. I'm not the prime of this, so.
Yeah, Brockman is a prime. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. No, and I think you're absolutely right, and the sustainability that the data isn't lost. I think this is really the goal of this discussion as well, because lots of data is collected within projects, and projects have a limited lifetime. So if there's a place where we can share and store and keep track of all the data and how it's used, I think this GeoGLAM in situ working group is ideal for that.
Maybe I can also add to this. Probably most of you don't know me. My name is Nicolas Gaspari, and I'm here on behalf of Agribora and our founder, Situ Odembo. Ian and Sophie, I think you both know him and you met him recently. So we are actually from the private sector. We are a startup building up in Kenya and East Africa right now. And our goal is also to provide farmers with valuable insights and to build a platform where we can use Earth observation data to combine it with field precise geolocations from farmers. And the idea is that we have a system here where we have incentives for farmers to give us their data of what they are growing on the field. And to use that in combination with remote sensing data. So here we are just at the beginning, but we are very open and to discussions. And of course, here we profit from all of the research that you do in advancing and having these repositories to share the data, but also the technology to do all of the Earth observation part. But we are open to find a solution where we can also share this data in a fair and also user-compliant way.
Good, thank you. So, and I see Michelle also has chipped in and indicated that the Copernicus In Situ data activity might be a place to go. I'm glad to see that's still active, and definitely follow up with you, Michelle. And welcome private sector interest as well in the community to help grow this. I think we need to move on, unfortunately. So we'll develop, as I said, some proposed actions and get back to everyone and see who wants to actually actively take part. And with that, we should jump over to the intercomparison activity, which Sophie is going to lead the discussion there. So Sophie, I'd invite you to share your screen and take it away.
Thank you. And do you see my screen?
Do.
Yeah, perfect. So very quickly, because I think that this was already discussed a lot. So on top of the in situ data working group, there was a proposition during the last ExCom meeting to have also a working group on products intercomparison. So there are more and more products which are available and also which are generated within GeoGLAM by different partners, sometimes in the same area, but sometimes for the same stakeholders, sometimes different stakeholders, etc. And so we might have some issues in credibility where we generate within GeoGLAM different products which can sometimes disagree. And so the idea of this intercomparison working group is ready to tackle this question. And so the question I have for today is how to start. So different points were already discussed internally. So the first is probably to identify an area of interest. There were two solutions that appeared so far. So Eastern Africa and Asia rice, where there are different products coming from different partners. Then on each area of interest, we should list existing crop maps, and maybe we should start not being too ambitious and focused on simple legends. Cropland on cropland, or depending on the variety and the amount of maps that would be available for this work intercomparison activity. The question is also, do we focus? Do we put a time limit in time to do this intercomparison? Do we include global or regional products that encompass the different countries? So at which scale do we do the assessment? And then probably each product that should come in the activity, we should define the specifications, the kind of metadata. And then before doing the intercomparison, there is probably the most important step, which is the definition of a protocol. And so here I have identified different sub-activities. So first, the comparisons of the metadata, the specifications of the product. Certainly a qualitative assessment, also quantitative assessment. There is a clear link here with the in situ data activity. We should come with some figures, with data that could be shared also between the different partners generating different products. And also doing a direct intercomparison to identify the agreement, the disagreement areas within the product. These are just IDs for this protocol, and so there are also questions on, well, there are different ways of conducting this intercomparison. Either we do just a full assessment of the different products, or we try to go one step further and say, okay, maybe the products will agree between them for 70% of the area, and so let's focus on the area where the products disagree, which is in fact the aspect that could motivate the use of one or another product. And so we could also decide to really bias the assessment to focus on the area where there are disagreements between the product. And so I have just put an example of assessment that we did to compare global water body products, and we defined 3 strata. And one of these stratum was about the discrepancies, and we really focused the assessment and understanding of the error on this area. Just to think about it. And probably a very important aspect is also the link to the user. So all the products were not generated towards the same kind of stakeholders, and so we should really do a usability assessment for the different user groups or use cases, and find a way to define some criteria performance for the different use cases. A question I have is, for me, this is not clear. What is the final goal of this intercomparison? Is it the possibility to put like a GeoGLAM stamp of approval of the product, which seems to be quite ambitious and well, difficult to reach an agreement between us, or also only, but still that would be a good achievement to document the different products with GeoGLAM assessment, user assessment, or not product assessment in terms of accuracy and usability. So this is something which is still an open question. In terms of links, I think that this intercomparison working group, well, we will work with the partners who are interested to share their products and to share the in situ data to conduct this activity. Probably we could also rely on the what we call GEOGLAM in situ database if we manage to have some first version of this data set. There are also, of course, a clear link to be done with the GCAM community, GCAM network. So there, do we officially work with GCAM to define the protocol? They have also a very nice experience in collaborative experiment, and we should rely on this experience to set up a bit our activity. So there is also the link with the CEOS, Land Product Validation Working Group. So I'm responsible on the land cover. And so this year we are working on an update of the land cover validation protocol. And so we could really make a link with that and also include some specific protocol for cropland. And there is a proposition to conduct this experiment on the AVL, so Agricultural Virtual Laboratory, which is an open source platform where you might have access to a wide bunch of data. And so, but this is something possible and just as an option. So this is a bit the way we could organize the activity. We should define, well, we should agree on the different questions and define also when we start, who comes on board, who wants to work on the protocol, who prefers applying the protocol to the different products. So there are different levels of involvement. And so this is a bit what we could discuss today or during the next workshop. And that's it for the presentation.
Thanks, Sophie. I'll just comment first and say that I think it's a great opportunity. The protocol in particular is really important. That would be a major contribution to our community and broader. Personally, I don't think GEOGLAM really wants to take much of a role in endorsing, but rather assessing a framework to assess different products to understand how it can best be used. But that's something we can decide as a community as we go forward. We have one question in chat from Michelle Massert. So it's not something. Is this not something that IASA Fritz et al. Has been developed in the past for land cover map comparison? I think this is referring to the validation, crowdsourcing validation type tool.
I've been working on that more on the user assessment and on collecting some data on global land cover products. Yeah, there was something on that.
Good, yeah. So it's part of it, but it's certainly not all of it. It's a very fairly narrow subset of the entire protocol picture that we'd be looking at, I guess.
I think that Fritz in the past, maybe nearly 10 years ago, has developed a tool for comparison of land cover maps. And I think you should maybe try to connect with him and have a look at what he has developed.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember that there was a tool, but yeah, I remember that he was working with Martin Herold, teams from IASA and then Wageningen University on this topic.
It's their Lago Wiki tool where you can compare different. You can use it. If I'm not mistaken, you can use it in both ways. One is comparison of different products, but also it's also a tool to collect new in situ data based on agreement or disagreement based on different land cover products. And it used to be land cover, but they moved also more into agriculture. Well, we can talk to Stefan on that.
And perhaps this is Benjamin, just to complement, because Isa was involved in the very early days of that. It actually implements CEOS CalVal procedures and protocols. And in the early days, it was fully open source as well to increase the full transparency. But it was focused on land cover, so if there is some agriculture adaptation necessary, that could be reused here. I would say the intercomparison would be going beyond the standard land cover part. So perhaps you need a little bit more flexibility than what was built into that system.
Good. Okay, we're going to go over time, but let's keep the meeting going. If you have to leave, anybody, please go ahead. Again, it's going to be recorded. Um, Andy, if you're still with us, I see you have you made a statement about some of the resources that are available in JCAM. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I was going to share my screen, but I'm not going to. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not going to share my screen, but on the JCAM page, we've loaded up a whole bunch of documents on the JCAM page. They've been there for a while, relating to in situ collection guidelines, some of which, have been around for a while. We're talking about crop type, those kinds of things. But there's some other stuff on there that we used actually in CalVal experiments such as SMATVEX, for example, which also relate to biophysical, plant biophysical characteristics, soil moisture, and in addition to that, phenology. We have the BBCH staging manual that was used in SMATVEX 2012 for defining phenology and these things. So the first thing to say is that some of those documents are there, and we've always threatened to try and update some of these. And of course, through this activity, this is something we'd work to. The second thing is, as Michelle mentioned in the comments, he talked about Copernicus having an in situ activity. There's a Canada Copernicus sort of collaboration going on right now where both Michelle and I were voluntold in a way to sort of try and move forward a little bit in terms of the in situ. We've done that a little bit slowly, and part of it, I think, on both of our sides has been due to COVID and other things. But there is most definitely an appetite, certainly here in Canada, to try and get not just agricultural in situ data flowing in free through open data, but all types of in situ observations. And that's actually partially what's slowing things down as well. And then the only third thing, Ian, that I'd like to say is that the biggest challenge when we did the SAR to comparison experiment, which I think we demonstrated the power of collaboration with all our international partners, collaborators, and sites, the biggest challenge to us in terms of producing good maps and getting good results was the quality of the in situ data. If you went back to Laura and Mehdi who were doing that work and you said, what was your biggest challenge or limitation? They would tell you the quality of the in situ data. So that's the only things I'd like to say.
Appreciate that. That's a good point. That's why we're here, I guess. Certainly, reference data is the biggest issue now that we've taken, or a lot of the computing and algorithm type issues have been dealt with over time, and open data. So that's good to hear. Anybody else have anything they want to contribute to the discussion?
Yeah, can you hear me, Ian? This is Dave.
Yeah, I can, Dave.
So I have a question to the group. This conversation's been maybe different than I was expecting. So in the United States, we're always looking for in situ data too, and the big frontier is what's being collected by all the machinery, so the planters, the harvesters, the fertilizing. And USDA, we've had a really hard time getting a hold of that. People don't want to share. And I'm confident this is happening over millions of fields, and it's probably happening globally. I'm wondering if you all in other parts of the world have been trying to reach out and get this type of data, because I mean, this is a tremendous data set when you have yields and how much fertilizer applied and row spacing and blah, blah, blah. It's really what we want and need. And it's being collected. We just can't get access.
No, back probably about 10 years ago, I was looking at that, and turns out for southwestern Ontario, some of the big agronomic companies that do a lot of the planting and so on and collect this data, they literally were storing all the farmers' data in a missile silo in the Dakotas somewhere. And they weren't making it freely available for sure. Even the farmers didn't have ownership of the data. So it's a huge issue.
Can I comment, Ian, too?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so this is a huge issue. A number of years ago, Canada, we presented at the OECD Digital Agriculture and Big Data, and this was one of the things that was flagged and it came down to intellectual, I guess, property. And so from a Canadian perspective, one of our big challenges, seems to be two big challenges. One is privacy issues, people not wanting to share the data with us because it's field and subfield level, and they're not sure what's going to happen with it. So that's the first challenge, is privacy issues. The second is farmers who've wanted to share the data with us, their data coming off machinery and yield monitors. We've said, thank you very much, but you don't own the data. And they've laughed at us and gone back and checked the fine print and realized they actually don't own the data, and they have absolutely no rights to redistribute that. So we find ourselves in a position where even if people were willing to serve that data up for us, for a lot of the experimentation, and believe me, we really want that yield data, they can't do it because they don't own it. It's owned by John Deere or Massey or whomever machines they have, unfortunately, and that seems to be a sticking point for us right now, at least in Canada.
Thanks, Andy. Anything else? We have another gentleman chat. Okay. Okay, so I think we're 5 minutes over. We were about 5 minutes late starting, so that's good. I think Sophie, I think you're still on. So same as with the in situ, perhaps we can work together to refine some of the questions and develop some proposed actions. We'll assume everybody's in on both initiatives now, and we'll send out the follow-up with those actions and potential ways forward, and ask people to weigh in on if they're interested in participating in one or both initiatives, or none is fine. And we'll go from there and decide how best to conduct future meetings. But I think really got to thank the discussion leaders today. They really got us off to a nice start.